So basically, to simplify what's going on, we, not just in the United States, but in the world, are within a Plato's cave controlled by globalists. And under these globalists are useful idiots. Useful idiots who are equity zealots, who patronize so-called marginalized groups, and at times create disturbing parodies of them, such as with the trans movement. At the end of the day, most people, no matter what they are normal people, and yet they want to stoke division for the sake of their ideology. That said, there is good news. For one thing, normal people who happen to be paying attention don't really believe what these authoritarians have to say. While it is sad that too many people still hold the benefit of the doubt for these people, it is also true that they are slowly losing leverage. And in fact, with the purchase of Twitter, they are slowly losing the grasp on information, aka their ability to produce misinformation and tell you what's misinformation. Bit by bit, piece by piece, conspiracies are being exposed, including the most recent reveal of the crypto scam that was favoring the Democrat Party for 2022. Much like how Trump used to be a Democrat and how people used to love him for his celebrity, Elon Musk used to be loved for his scientific advancements, especially with Tesla. But now that he's going against the hive mind, he is considered a threat by the state. So much so that Twitter tried to poison pill its own stock, as well as try to create lawsuits just to keep Elon from being able to purchase Twitter. There was an issue of its actual worth considering bots, and I would have liked to have Twitter being bought before the 2022 election. But regardless, the purchase came through and it is coming up with fruit. Companies such as Apple have tried to boycott the company, as have news stations, to no avail, since they too are part of the hive mind. The same news companies would tell you, now that Elon Musk has bought Twitter, that Twitter will be a platform with no consequences for things such as hate speech, though they are the hateful ones, and their lackeys at Twitter are paying the consequences for their conspiratorial actions, just by trying to level the playing field, so that it's not just a pro-socialist, pro-left safe space. These people have gone hysterical. They even try to accuse Elon of hypocrisy for censoring them when it can easily be explained through them doxing and performing illegal actions. The fact that right-wing voices have been shadow banned is no longer up for debate. It is a fact. Except they do not call it shadow banning. They refer to it as visibility filtering. I'm pretty sure you all know how that is a violation of one's right to speak. These same authoritarians don't even like it when you share their own content, as does libs of TikTok and what they do to show what they're doing, especially towards the youth. Now, I do not blame Gen Z for this. Before TikTok, there was Facebook, which have made donations so large that it makes what Dinesh D'Souza did years ago look like a misdemeanor. And then before Facebook, there was MySpace. Basically, the next generation is always going to try something new to stand out from the previous generations. It's just too bad that Gen Z has been spoiled to believe that their beliefs don't need to be questioned. And it is also too bad that the platform they're currently using happens to be used by the Chinese Communist Party for spying. Even when not discussing spies that are currently keeping an eye on Washington, D.C., the CCP is not any better in their own country. To retaliate for a disease that has only really hurt the elderly or the morbidly obese, their governments have been guilty of welding the doors of their civilians shut, keeping them from being able to get out. They even took back the previously democratic Hong Kong well before the treaty regarding unification has passed. Speaking of, though it may actually be worse in places like Australia and New Zealand, who have actually formed concentration camps to quarantine the sick. So basically, I can summarize this chapter as rules for thee, but not for me. So if 2020 and 2021 were so bad, why didn't the red wave come as expected? Well, it did, just not hard enough. The truth of the matter is, there are more issues with the current system than I have already skimmed. You see, the same offensive and patronizing equity zealots are also using their rhetoric to dismiss voter integrity, saying that black people don't know know where to turn in their ballots or how to go on the internet. Now, people may be asking, is the 2016 election rigged, or was the 2020 election rigged, considering how some consider the 2020 election to be the cleanest ever, and yet hypocritically dismiss the 2016 election as illegitimate, for the same reasons that we would consider the 2020 election to be illegitimate. But really, it seems as though elections have always been rigged since forever, including with Al Gore back in 2000. The difference in 2016 is that Hillary did try to steal the election. It's just that she miraculously and thankfully failed due to Trump's charisma, or rather more accurately, his ability to attract an audience who really believed in him. Hillary had corporate powers as well as celebrities on her side, but Trump really did have the people, leading to his victory via the Electoral College, which the Democrats have despised ever since, outright trying to have it abolished, which is ironic considering what would happen just 4 years later. What happened in 2018 wasn't anything special. It was the midterms for back then, and usually people don't really pay attention to those. But by 2020, because of the pandemic, as well as some last-minute changes during 2019, we started having multiple states that okayed the concept of early voting and mail-in voting, not to be confused with absentee voting. But ultimately, what these new policies really did is screw up the electoral process so badly that what used to take a mere night now takes weeks, if not months, which just allows the establishment more time to fix the contest. Despite trying to overwhelm the system once more, the 2020 election ended with devastating failure, resulting in the relatively uncharismatic Biden presidency. I should also clarify that the Supreme Court did not dismiss the cases made against Biden due to illegitimacy. They were just never discussed, and the media was more than happy to play cover for everyone involved. The attempt to overwhelm the system via charisma was tried once more on 2022. Those involved who wanted to vote for the right wing for populist reasons were prepared to vote on day rather than participate in early voting as a means of principle. The tactics used in 2020 were taken into account and prepared for, but there was still the onslaught of backyard funds from scams such as the Ukraine war and certain activist groups asking for donations. Not that what happened at 2022 was unexpected. If there was any silver lining, it was that the means of theft had become much more blatant than they were back in 2020. And that included even the smallest things like Sharpies being used as writing utensils, ballots being of the wrong size by just an inch, ballot harvesting, ballot recovering, etc. Dinesh D'Souza even distributed a documentary known as 2000 Mules, showing numerous footage of unknown persons carrying numerous ballots to dump into ballot boxes in the middle of the night. So if the current system of voting has gotten that bad, why haven't we changed it? Well, as you may have guessed, in the United States of America, it's not just the federal election. Most of the elections for the midterms were on the state level, with the states having different rules for whether mail-in voting is allowed, early voting is allowed, etc. Now, thankfully, since 2020, there were states such as Florida that have taken the time to fortify their electoral system so nothing like it could ever happen again. But of course, this doesn't apply for every state. For example, there is Alaska, which has a system in place known as ranked choice voting, which essentially means if you have 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat, the 2 Republicans can siphon votes from each other, allowing the Democrat candidate to win by default. There's also the issue of college students, which the Democrats have made an effort to pander to, especially with the broken promise of forgiving student debt. Now, personally, this may be mean of me to say, but I don't think college students should be voting. On top of a school system that has them infantilized, with a lot of them taking on useless degrees that do not qualify for any STEM field, there's also the matter of who exactly gets affected from these votes. If anyone's going to care about things like, say, the economy, it's going to be the average worker. The person who works from 9 to 5 every Monday through Friday, or someone who has a family, aka some dependents to look after. And thus these are going to be the people who are the most dependent on the way society spends its own value. College students, especially the ones who graduate from high school then go right to college, honestly do not have that experience. I'm almost inclined to think it's on purpose, where you have these inexperienced people who have never taken on the real world in a minimalistic sort of way, and thus are going to think they know what they're talking about just because they're over 18. Well, I'm sorry, but you have to acknowledge that if you don't have any experience on the subject, you're just an idiot. It doesn't matter if you're well-informed, well-educated, however you want to interpret that. What matters is the wisdom, the experience. Just because you get A's in high school doesn't mean you have experience. Now, did I vote during college? Well, that's the thing. That was when I voted for Obama, and I regret it. You remember when I said that he was charismatic? Well, back then, that's all it really took for me to want to vote for him. And I realized that's not a really good approach to doing things. I, too, had A's throughout high school, but that certainly didn't mean I knew what I was talking about. And yes, I was starting to research a little into politics by the time, but again, I didn't have the experience. I didn't have the know-how of what was going to happen if you tamper with the economy as if it is made of funny money. Somehow, if barring college students from being able to vote means barring myself from the past from being able to vote, I'd happily take that condition. And on top of that, there are a lot of college students that, because of their supposed genius, again, are really just so obnoxious. Just because you have A's in sociology doesn't mean you're better than everyone else. You, like everyone else, can be wrong. And chances are, given how life works, you probably have been wrong before. Honestly, if you can't admit to being wrong sometimes, then honestly, you failed as an adult, as well as a potential voter. And really, when I say that, it really makes me think there are some adults who also really shouldn't be voting.